Hello, thank you for tuning in. I would say this is my first video on this subject, and please let me know if you like it. I'm planning on doing more, and if you have any other subjects you would like to see a tutorial about, just pop me a comment in the comment section. Today I will show you how I get from this to this, and I will show you how to do this using Camera Raw. You can follow the same process using Lightroom, which is no different, or any other photo correction software for that matter, because they all have the same adjustments. They might be situated differently, but in all of them you can change exposure, you can change highlights, you can change whites, shadows, you can change the HSL settings, hue, and saturation. So having said that, let's jump into it. This picture was taken at the docks in Brooklyn, New York. My ISO, as you can see, was a little bit high in this one. I was shooting without a tripod. It was in the night. Usually I recommend shooting with the ISO that's as low as possible, beginning with 100. But let's go from here and see what we can do with this picture, because it might be that you shot your picture with an iPhone, so it might look similar. Now what we have here, what I usually start with, is the highlights, the areas that are somewhat overexposed. And I reduce the highlights just a little bit until it goes away. Now you have the option, you could press option on the Mac or control on the PC, and then while you move the highlights, you can see here everything goes dark, and you can move it until it's all gone for the whole picture. But sometimes I don't mind certain areas being overblown, because if it's white anyway. There's no difference in that area in terms of the highlights showing as white, or in the case of being overblown. So I just usually do it manual. Okay, from there on I work with my whites as well, because they are also partly responsible for the areas that are overblown. Then I work with the blacks. See, in the bottom part of the image here, it's quite dark, so I see if I can bring some light into it and make things more visible by raising the blacks. And then I go to the contrast. Okay, this is like, for me, it compresses everything a bit. Now you see, everybody has his own workflow when he does this. I use this workflow because I have a certain special goal that I work with. See, I look at the picture and I try to bring out what I saw that evening, because the camera can't capture the full dynamic range of what we see with our eyes. It can only expose for either the highlights or the shadows of an image. And then what we do, or what I do in post, is I try to bring out and level out the other side that the camera was not able to capture. So this shot, as you might notice, has a lot of yellow and green in it. But what I find interesting, the most prevalent colors here are the red, the blues on top in the building, on top of the building in the left corner, and some purples and magenta down here in the left against that building. So later on I will go and desaturate the image, leaving only those colors. Okay, I'll show you what I mean by that. So now, like I said, I changed the highlights and the lighting. The basic exposure is okay right now. Now I'm gonna go and raise the contrast just a little bit. It will make the image a bit darker again, which is okay. I might change that by going a little bit higher with the exposure, but you have to be careful when you change the exposure, because that can also introduce noise to the image, and I have some noise up here, quite a bit, due to the ISO I shot with, but that's no problem right now. We can still make this picture look very pretty. Okay, so next what I do is I'll go to the saturation area, and as I said, I'm gonna keep the reds, maybe raise them just a little bit. I'm gonna take out the orange. That's gonna darken my sky a bit, but that's okay. We might be able to work with that later on. Or in terms of the orange, we could go to the hue and see if we can turn it towards the yellows. Bring the yellows to the green, and bring the greens more towards the blue. Okay, that has a certain change to the image as well, but it does a little bit too much in this corner, so I'm gonna change that. Okay, let's go back to the saturation and turning down the yellows. Well, we're almost going for a black and white look. See, I'm subtracting all the colors right now that are intrusive in this picture. All I want left is those nice rich colors, okay, not the overly reds. So I'm kind of going for a desaturated but with a tint of color look. Raise the blues just a little bit, because the building, some lights in there have blue. Raise that was the aquas, now we're raising the blues. See up there in the building what happens with the blues if we desaturate it, or if we introduce a little bit more saturation to it. The magenta, the purple doesn't do much. The magenta isn't doing that much either. I'm gonna take that down. So now we're left with the blue, the aqua, the greens, orange and reds. Now let's work on the greens, because you see here to the right we have those trees, those bushes, and I think it would look really pretty if we would bring them out just a little bit in this picture. But it's also introducing some green in the building, so we won't do this too much, just a hint of it. Okay, and we can bring in a little bit of the orange to keep a warmth. Okay, now overall this part of the picture looks interesting now. It's a big difference from how it was before. So what we can do now is work with the tone curve. And I'm working, just so you might have noticed, I'm working in Camera Raw. I do have Lightroom. However, it's on my MacBook. But since I'm working on my iMac, I'm using the camera raw, which is there by default, but just so you know, the options and the sliders I'm using here to manipulate this picture are the same in Lightroom, so you can go ahead and use Lightroom and follow this tutorial. There's no difference. Okay, fixate these points, put a little point here, and bring up the highlights, making the picture a bit darker, but it's pulling all the content together. Okay, and then at the same time we can raise the highlights just a tad bit. There we go, bringing it all back. So now we'll work on the noise. Okay, I always do that at the end, because all the changes that we make in terms of exposure, in terms of the tone curve, introduce some sort of noise to the image. So I will go and adjust the luminance towards the end. First I'll bring the luminance up to a certain measure. That is pleasing to the eye. You just need to be careful that you don't use the luminance too much. Then I will raise the sharpening to get the background, those lights and edges a bit crispier. But to do that and to have the sharpening just for the edges of certain highlights and not everything, you need to raise the masking. As you see, this is what happens. See, this is if you just have the general sharpening, it's everything. But once you raise the masking, you're actually telling it to only sharpen the areas around the highlights. Okay, so that looks much better already. So in this case we were actually saving the picture. A lot is visible now, and this has become actually a really pretty picture for now, but I'm still not very pleased with the colors in it. So just to deal with that issue, I will work on the split toning. You need to raise the saturation just a little bit to see an effect. I raise it to 12, and then I go through it, seeing which color might be interesting, and bring out, let's raise it a bit more to 28. I'm looking for a color that also gives us some interesting feel in the sky. Right now I like what this does to the light. Okay, gives us a nice, because the night anyway is quite warm, and this gives us a nice cold, almost icy look to the lights. Now everyone might have a different taste, that's fine. And we mix that up first at 12 with a little bit of split toning for the shadows. That was changing the highlights. That's why you saw the saturation and the hue change in the hue of the lights change, the highlights. Now we're going to change the hue of the shadows, and that will actually also change the sky, and that darkness was a bit grimy, and we might be able to bring it to an interesting reddish. I could settle for since we're working with blue, red, and greens, I could settle somewhere here in this blue area and just raise it up a tad bit. Okay. Okay. Now that will cast a lot of hue on these poles down here at the dock, but that's fine. Okay. What you can do is also work on the balance over here if you want it more towards the shadows or more towards the highlights. I think I might go with leaving it just in the middle. Okay. Now I'll go back to my basic touch-up. And it's become a little bit colorful again. So I might go down with the saturation and raise the vibrance just that much. See what it does. Yeah, I might raise the saturation just a little bit. Bring down its vibrance just that much. Let's do a little bit more of the luminance. Taking care of the sky now. You won't be able to remove all of the noise, but what the luminance does, it washes it out, and you get soft mushy areas up here, almost like cotton flocks or night clouds, if you want to say so, which is okay. So in this case, this is what I would have done to the image in RAW, just the basic touch-up to save it. As I said, it was very highly exposed. I'll make another one with a perfectly exposed, correctly exposed image. But in this case, you don't want to, picture's a picture and it's a memory. You don't want to throw something away because it doesn't meet a certain standard. And this has become a pretty picture in my opinion. It's pleasing to look at for me, and it has an artistic value in the way we made it speak through the presence of certain colors and the absence of certain others. Okay, so I'm gonna open it in Photoshop. And what I do here in Photoshop for this at this stage, it's not much. I am working on the framing now, so I will straighten out the buildings just that much. Okay, the center one, and this already leads to a certain framing. I'll just leave it that way, and I'll export the file, save for web, and I choose that because now you can save it as a JPEG, And if we look at it up close, you know, it has turned to be into a quite clean image. You see, we've sharpened it, and there's a lot of detail in it. You know, this is a nice picture. All right, even though we shot it with a very high exposure. It might be a little bit more difficult to do these changes if you start out with a JPEG, let's say from an iPhone picture or so, but it's still something that you could do in that case. However, you would not be able to use RAW for it. You would need a different, I suggest if you work with a JPEG image from your iPhone on the Mac, you would use the standard imaging program that Mac uses to open it. I'll make another video with that next time. So here I usually choose to export them around 5 megabyte. So I'll raise the quality of this one just a tad bit. See down here, okay, 5.61, that's okay. And then I'll save this image. I have a separate folder for its own, and I also saved the Photoshop project just in case I want to go back and do something with it. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was to the least a bit entertaining, but otherwise also educational. This is just how I would do it in this particular moment. I have different steps for every picture, because each picture, like I said, has a different calling in how it wants to look like, and how I try to bring it as close as possible to what I saw, but also sometimes I try to give it a artistic touch of where I say, okay, I'm trying to bring out or trying to bring forth a certain pretty touch to the image. In this image here, as you see, we worked on the reds and the blues and the greens most prevalently. So you'll have the red, the blue over here reflecting from this building, okay, which is very dominant up here in the skyline. And then we have the warm colors down here, and we have the colder blues and ices that we brought out by changing the hue in the buildings. But we still left the green of the trees over here on this side, and all of this together gives the picture a certain depth. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you in my next video.